Good evening, dear delegates. Could we take our seats, please? Let's take our seats and let's try to conclude this meeting. We are definitely basing our hopes on you that you're going to help us move as fast as we can. So we had left off when we had started considering this document CBD-WG2020-04 /CRP3, which is on draft elements of a possible decision operationalizing the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And dear delegates, as I communicated earlier, and I would like to again get back to it, is that what the document you have before you has been prepared from the comments that were received so far. And two, I would like also to take note that there's going to be a written opportunity for you to provide additional input into these elements of the draft decision. A notification is going to be sent out by the Secretariat. And as I told you also earlier, that this decision itself is an evolving one because the process is still ongoing. And therefore, based on that, I had requested you, dear delegates, that we could adopt this CRP document as, not adopt, rather approve it as presented here, with the understanding that you are going to have the opportunity to give those written comments when the notification is sent out from the Secretariat, and the Secretariat will compile those comments and it will be prepared as an info doc that will be made available as we head to COP. So those are the scenarios which I'm really requesting you to bear with us on, and if possible, we adopt this CRP as is, and then we move on. But I see Belarus. Belarus, do you have something different from what I am proposing?
Спасибо, господин председатель.
Thank you, Chair, for giving the floor. We would like to point out that when we previously looked into this document, we had already submitted our written comments to this document, which have not been reflected in this document here, concerning and referring financial support of all countries on the part of GEF, and this draft does not reflect that. So in point 18, we would like to add, after the words developing countries, countries with economies in transition. Thank you.
Said all this is going to be reflected, and Secretary has taken note of that. So I do not see that there is a different view from this proposal. So, dear delegates, in the interest of time, I would like to propose that we consider the approved CRP. In fact, I first of all should say this CRP is approved. Secondly, that in the interest of time, I would like to propose that we consider the approved CRP document to be adopted as an L document. The L document will be the same as the approved CRP, and we will not need to wait for, again, the conversion itself to, as other documents are going through. So I hope that is understandable, given the background that I've already said about this particular CRP. So thank you. We will now go to we'll now go to the next document. This is on agenda item 5, and we'll now commence our review of the outcomes of contact group 5 and agenda item 5 on digital sequence information on genetic resources. To begin, we would like to hear a report back from the contact group 5 on digital sequence information on genetic resources. As most of you may be aware by now, this group has been chaired by the co-leads, that is Mr. Gaut of Norway and Ms. Letitia of South Africa. I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Gaut to give us a feedback. Gaut, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Francis. As you will recall, the contact group on DSI had established a Friends of the co-leads to work on the decision to the COP. The Friends met for a total of 3 sessions. For the second and third sessions, they discussed elements for the COP decision, clustered into a number of themes. Substantial progress was made into consolidating the text on the REACH theme. A non-paper was prepared on the basis of the outcomes of the group of friends. The non-paper included a brief recommendation from the working group and the draft elements discussed by the friends group in the annex. The non-paper was considered and approved with some minor amendments by the contact group at its second session yesterday. We are pleased to draw your attention to CRP4 that has been prepared on this basis and is before you for your consideration today. The contact group also suggested the following topics that could be explored by the informal coaches advisory group on DSI. Additional analysis of hybrid approaches, further considering definition and scope of DSI, legal aspects of the proposed policy options, multilateral approaches to benefit sharing from the use of DSI, mutual supportiveness with other ABS instruments, care principles of indigenous data governance, the multilateral system of access and benefit sharing of the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. We suggest this list of topics be included in the report of the meeting. We would like to express our gratitude to the 2 facilitators of the Friends of the Co-Leads who have done an excellent job facilitating the discussions. We would also like to thank all of the participants in the contact group and the group of friends. The deliberations were constructive once more, and a positive and cooperative spirit prevailed throughout the work of the contact group and the Friends of the Co-Leads. Finally, we would like to thank the Secretariat for their excellent support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your report. I would like now to note that my co-chair and I will reflect in the report of the meeting the list of proposed topics for the informal co-chairs advisory group to consider during the intersessional period before COP15. Distinguished delegates, we will now like to begin our review of CRP under this agenda item. And this is CRP4, that is CBD/WG2020-04/CRP4, entitled Digital Sequence Information on Genetic Resources for consideration and approval. We would like to ask if there are comments on this CRP and if it could be otherwise approved as presented here. I see Argentina.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. We have identified a request that we had presented before the Friends of the Co-Leads. Our delegation had requested to add in the annex, along with the multilateral option that was present, the options that are identified in paragraph 40A and 40B of the document, CBD Whiskey Golf 2020/3/INF/8, in the understanding that we were going to have there a hybrid proposal that will serve for further discussion. we would kindly request that this is included in the Friends of the Co-Leads as requested. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Yes, thank you, Argentina. We have taken note of your proposal, and the Secretariat will liaise with the co-leads to have that taken on board. I have Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Colombia wants to back up the proposal made by Argentina, and we hope this can move forward this topic. Thank you so much for the word.
Thank you, Colombia. European Union.
Oops.
Microphone to European Union, please.
Thank you. I don't know.
You need to remove your headset away from the microphone, sir. Thank you.
I think there is a technical problem. You are coming on and then off. Okay, EU.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and apologies for these technical difficulties. I have to say I'm just inquiring to be told exactly what would be inserted where. That wasn't clear from the Argentinian request. I thought that the reference to hybrid approaches being a element of further analysis in the IAG will already be integrated into the report of our meeting. I would like to go back to my note to understand whether the proposal that was mentioned by Argentina was actually made during the to the Friends of the Chair of the contact group. I have no clear recollection, but maybe if it could be shown on screen what would go where, we would actually find it possible to remember. So please, I would seek clarification from either you, the Secretariat, or the distinguished delegate of Argentina.
Yeah, thank you, EU. I will be shortly requesting Charlotte to give us an update on that. But as previously communicated by my co-chair here, we don't have that practice of displaying text of the CRP here at the plenary, so please take note of that. Argentina, perhaps, before I give the floor to Charlotte. Argentina?
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. As the distinguished delegate from the European Union said, and maybe he will recollect now, during the Friends of the Co-Leads, it was suggested that the hybrid options are not included in the document or the body of the document, but we rather include some sort of reference of the decision in, of course, between brackets, because that was not going to be discussed now, just like we did not discuss the multilateral option. So in that regard, my delegation at that time, supported by other delegations, kindly requested to include two proposals that we had in paragraph 40A and 40B of the document of the colleagues' report, which was presented before the work, the contact group one as Inf 8, that is the document. Our request simply would like to underscore what we requested then, because we understand that it was something that was going to be placed between brackets, knowing that this was going to be discussed further on. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the Secretariat. You have. Okay, so thank you, Argentina. This will be included in the L document, and I hope that is also now clear to the EU, because you are requesting to, I think, for much more information to be given. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I do not recall that particular proposal being made in those form. It would be very helpful if the Secretariat could actually perhaps read out the text that would be included in the L document. Otherwise, it's difficult for us to see exactly what is going to be done. Thank you.
Okay, Secretariat, just, EU, give us some few minutes here. Okay, Secretariat.
Thank you, EU. Indeed, as Argentina stated, during the discussions, there was a request for us to reflect the proposals from Colombia and Costa Rica in the document. And it was an omission from our side that we did not reflect it in the non-paper. I will give over to Charlotte to read the actual paragraphs that are to be included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in Doc 8 from the working group at its third meeting, the first report of the co-leads on the work of the informal co-chairs advisory group, paragraph 40 reads, the following two hybrid options were received through the call for submission through notification 2021-063. A. The first hybrid option is a combination of options 1 and 2.2 presented above. Under this arrangement, there would be three alternatives that would depend on whether single or multiple DSI was used and whether the country of origin of the genetic resources from which the DSI was derived is known. Little 1. For single or multiple genetic sequences that come from a known single country of origin that acts also as the provider country of the genetic resource from which the DSI was obtained, PIC and MAT should be negotiated directly with the provider country of the genetic resource from which the DSI was obtained. 2. When using multiple genetic sequences that come from different but known countries of origin that act also as the providers of the genetic resource from which the DSI were obtained, no PIC should be negotiated, and the benefits from the use of DSI are handled by an international system that directs benefits to the countries of origin. In this case, an internationally standardized MAT is used. 3. When using single or multiple genetic sequences where the country of origin of the genetic resource from which the DSI were obtained is not known, no PIC should be negotiated, and the benefits from the use of DSI are handled by an international system and used for global projects for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. B is the second hybrid option proposed. The second option is also a hybrid option that would facilitate open access to sequences with some terms and conditions in case the genetic sequences are being used for commercial purposes. Similarly to the option above, this alternative would employ internationally standardized MATs when the country of origin of the genetic resources from which the sequences are derived is not known, and the benefits would go into a multilateral fund. In the case where the country of origin is known, the benefits must be shared with the provider countries, including indigenous peoples and local communities. This is paragraph 40. It will be included in the annex for the L document.
Thank you, Secretariat. European Union?
Mr. Co-Chair, I would remember if that point had been made in the Friends of the Chair or the contact group, which wasn't the case. It adds a massive amount of text to a document that has been discussed at great length for hours, and there was a lot of time for making that proposal verbatim during that time. I think that the proper way of dealing with this is that perhaps the statement by the distinguished delegate of Argentina is included in the report by saying that they would wish that the elements contained in the paragraphs that were just read out would be taken into account in the further work under the IAC and in view of further negotiations for the COP. I think that from that perspective, we really should not fundamentally add such a very large amount of text to a document that had been agreed in Friends of the Chair and in the contact group. And I do not recall that Argentina actually made that request at the closing session of the contact group. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. Argentina, I think you've heard that comment from the EU. Now, with the spirit of moving forward on this CRP, Argentina, if you could be flexible on that proposal by the EU, Argentina.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I am sorry that the European Union does not remember what other delegations have said they remembered, such as the delegation of Colombia, or that the Secretariat recognized as an omission from the document. I don't see why, given this acknowledgement, it is required to eliminate something from a document that was requested by a party and that was not even demanding for it to be accepted. We're just requesting for it to be included in brackets in the understanding that there are several parties, such as the delegation from the European Union must remember, that requested that during the process we acknowledge the need to discuss hybrid positions and that these hybrid options have to be considered eventually in the result of this negotiation process. We do not think that this inclusion is somehow hindering the results of the negotiation or judging on what will happen. If I remember correctly, several delegations stated that this does not favor hybrid options, but different options, multilateral options, and that it should be included in an annex, that this type of approaches are better placed in an annex. That is when my delegation expressed, with the support of others, that then what we could do is to mention these two paragraphs in the annex together with the annex that exists today with the recommendation. So I would ask the delegation of the European Union a flexibility in this case, because it would just reflect what has been discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. Excuse me. Let me try to see whether we could find a middle ground on how to settle this problem, if I may call it a problem. Now, we have, I think within us here, the Friends of the Colleagues, who helped us to conduct this meeting. So either if Malawi is there to give us some feedback, or the UK, please, before then we decide on the next course of action. Either Malawi or UK, the Friends of the Colleagues, for this agenda item. So if you could take the floor, please, if you are in the room. Please, I think the UK is going directly to EU. Hopefully then you can get to us. Yeah, so just give us some few minutes. Okay, dear delegates, I think let's hear the feedback. I'll give the floor to Argentina. Argentina, please.
Co-chair. And so our proposal, in order to reach an agreement, and actually it's a better reflection of what we had done in the contact group, is just to put in the annex something along the lines of possible approaches for a solution, hybrid solution on access and benefit sharing arising out of the use of DSI on genetic resources are reflected in document CBD/WG2020-3/INF/8, paragraph 40A and B. And this is actually what we requested in the Friends of the Chair. We requested to have the text, but the way in which it was expressed, it was this way. And another idea, basically, mainly, is to have that as a possibility to discuss hybrid approaches as possible outcome of a solution for DSI. And I think that that correctly represents what was said, and I hope that this is something that we can accept. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. So I take it that that is something acceptable with the EU as well, since you've been consulting each other. I'll now give the floor to the parties that have requested for the floor, but I hope that you can help us move forward on this. I now give the floor to Iran. Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and the Secretariat for giving me the floor. Congratulations to all for respected determination and persistence in the present meeting within the last week. As the delegate of the Islamic Republic of Iran, we would like to announce that the digital sequencing information, science, and technology is a rapidly growing knowledge, and we hope to use it for raising sustainable life and food sovereignty, while there are some immoral activities corresponding to the DSI, such as biological weaponry, that are harmful for biodiversity and human beings in general. Therefore, Iran wants to know that ethical and moral concerns should be taken into account within the DSI in accordance with the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Iran. I think that will be captured in the report, but I would like us to focus our attention a little bit more if we have anything that we have any comments on these CRPs. I now give the floor to Costa Rica, followed by Namibia. Costa Rica.
Muchas gracias, señor copresidente.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Costa Rica fully supports what has been expressed by Argentina, that the document mentioned, paragraph 40A and 40B, should be added to the annex. For us, it's very important that we can discuss the ways in which the governance will take place, the governance and regulation of the benefit sharing of DSI. It's extremely important that this discussion moves forward because we can move at the same pace as technology so that our legal frameworks distribute equitably the benefits and are updated at the same pace as new technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Costa Rica. As we said just immediately after Argentina took the floor, that action is going to be taken, is going to be added to the annex, so don't worry about that. Next is Namibia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We would just like to confirm that in the list of activities that were mentioned by the co-lead of the contact group and that you said you would include in the report, during that discussion, Namibia suggested that we have a session in the IAC to discuss how a multilateral system would work, because we actually have had already in the IAC a discussion on hybrid systems. So I just want to, your assurance, or maybe the assurance from the co-lead, that IAC will look at the multilateral options specifically. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Namibia? Yes. Namibia, I'm told that it is already there, so be rest assured. Next is the floor is to Ecuador.
Gracias, señor copresidente.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. In order to move forward with the work and also with the due respect of the hard work of the working group, some limitations were to be expected because we are small delegations. Nevertheless, we have made an assessment and analyzed all the results of this working group, and we found that there are still some considerations that we can improve with traceability, for example. We believe that there is a huge opportunity for these proposed hybrid systems that can accompany and also test a monitoring and traceability system that can be useful for all countries. We've also found some changes, small changes, that could be useful for all of us for future debates, for future discussions, and all these small comments, we will submit them in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Costa Rica. That will be captured in the report of this meeting. Japan?
Thank you, co-chair. In the previous occasion, my delegation was thinking along the same line with the European Union. And now that we have some discussion, we just need to move on. One question I want to ask to the co-chair is that the proposal made by the Argentina is placed in the appendix to the annex or annex, body of annex. I just wonder, I mean, which one is the case? There's a difference in the status and nature of the placement or of the sentence. Thank you.
Okay, Japan. Let me give this floor to Secretariat to just clarify on that. I think it was said, but just make it more clear, perhaps.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Yes, so we will add the text agreed by Argentina and the European Union to the appendix of the annex, right after the proposal from the African group. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear delegates, I do not see more requests for the floor, so the CRP is hereby approved. Dear delegates, in the interest of time, I'm going to take it to another level. I would like to propose that we consider the approved CRP document to be adopted as an L document. The L document will be the same as the approved CRP, and we will not need to wait again for its conversion at this stage. So if Japan, I was about to get my Japan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Kohli. I just wonder whether I can make a statement, a short statement for record after the approval of the draft recommendation now or in the later in occasion, at the adoption of the document.
Japan, I would think let's adopt it, then you can, let's adopt an L, then you can make your statement.
Okay, later, okay. Thank you.
So immediately. So I do not see any further requests for the floor, and I therefore see no objection for us to approve this document as an L document. So the CRP is hereby adopted as an L document. So Japan, now you can make your statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. My delegation would like to make a short statement for record after the adoption of draft recommendation. First and foremost, my delegation would wish to express its heartfelt appreciation to co-leaders of Contact Group 5 and co-facilitators of Friends of Co-Chair for their excellent work and dedication in facilitating and concluding our discussion on this important item in Nairobi in a timely manner. Mr. Co-Chair, our discussion on digital sequence information on genetic resources is a complex and controversial one with implications and consequences on open access that is essential for research and innovation, as well as the benefit sharing, on which many stakeholders and sectors have high interest and stakes. Therefore, it is critically important to ensure inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability in the process. From this point of view, my delegation emphasized the importance of participation of and engagement with multiple stakeholders, as well as sharing of necessary reports and information on the independent assessment by a consultant, including its terms of reference, both of which are key for parties to discuss the issue seriously, to seek a proper and clear outcome, not just cleaning the bracketed text to reach final conclusion. We will remain engaged in good faith in further discussion on this important issue. My delegation trusts that this statement be reflected in the report of the working group. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Japan. Dear delegates, we will now proceed to consider the other remaining L documents, and I will be requesting my co-chair shortly to take us through that. And after that, then we shall go to the adoption. We shall go to agenda item 6, other matters, and then the adoption of the meeting report. After that, we come to the closing statements, and then we will close the meeting. So, co-chair, yes, over to you.
Thank you, Francis. We will now conclude our work here. We will first adopt our last L document, and then we will move to consider other item under item 6, other matters. This will be followed by the adoption of the meeting report under item 7, and finally we'll hear closing statement under item 8. Before we begin, we would like now to invite the Secretariat to provide us with... No? It's done. We don't need to do it. This is even greater. I'm sure you won't be sad. So let's move to the adoption of the draft recommendation from this body that are ready for consideration. So let's move on to agenda item 4 on post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Under this agenda item, we have one document for consideration. I now submit for adoption document CBD Working Group 2020-04 L2 Annex. Can we adopt this document? I see no objection. Document CBD Working Group 2020-04 L2 Annex is adopted. This brings us to the end of the process for adopting the remaining L document. Russian Federation, please, you have the floor.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to congratulate you and all the delegates, as well as the Secretariat, on finalizing the work on those documents, and would like to express our gratitude for active participation to all the delegates. We would like to point out several issues that we consider important during this conference, and we think that part of our discussion was happening in a mode in which we did not discuss the framework, but a new convention or a protocol to this convention. This global framework seems to be subsiding the convention. I would like to remember that the GBF is an important part of the convention. It is important, but it is only a part of the convention. And I would like to point out that during the COP15, the GBF will not be the only item on discussion, but there will be 30 or maybe even 35 other items that we will have to discuss. So, and those are the results of the work of the Technical Advice Committee, subsidiary body, and also the subsidiary body on implementation. And I would like us to remember that this work on the goals and the tasks should be formulated in such a way that it will stipulate the place where we would like to be in 2030 or 2050. We shouldn't speak about who and what should do to get there, but about 30 at least decisions of the Conference of the Parties 15 will deal with such important issues as strategic plans, mobilization of resources, and capacity development, and different reporting modules, as well as financial mechanisms and some other thematical programs, for example, marine program and invasive species. So this will be the place to discuss in detail all those issues and think what shall we do and how to get there. So let's keep in mind that during the next stage in the COP, we will really get there and implement the decision taken in the COP 14, so that we will get a document that will be concise and clear to all the people, not only to those that are involved in the negotiations in this particular room, but also to outsiders and to those people who work in the field of the environment. So we should keep in mind that we should be able to read the text that we have written. Who will be able to understand a paragraph which takes 20 lines? And what issues should really be mentioned in the GBF, and what other issues should be taken elsewhere to other documents? I would like to remind you that the GBF will also be adopted by the COPs, by the parties, exactly in the same manner. So let's keep that in mind. And let's remember that our work happens in the context of the existing convention. So the GBF is not a separate document which lives its own life, but it is integrated into the scope of other documents of the convention. And I hope that if we succeed in keeping this in mind and remember the scope of work lying ahead of us in Montreal, we will be able to proceed quicker. And finally, I would like to say that I have been working in this convention for many years, and I have noted some changes. And during this week, I have noted that we have been able to reach compromise, and I would like to call to the parties to work for those compromise decision as much as possible and as often as possible. Thank you to all the co-leads that have done tremendous work, and to all the delegates and to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Rasha. Your remark are duly noted. This thing, so we finish the L document. Before we move to the remaining agenda item, my co-chair and I would like to say a few words about next step in this process. Distinguished delegates, we have made some progress during this fourth meeting here in Nairobi, but it remains clear that we're not yet at the final stage of having a draft that is concise and easy to communicate document that is to be sent to the Conference of the Parties later this year. Parties and stakeholders, we need to make the best of the time remaining between the meeting in Nairobi and the start of the conference on 5 December 2022. Between now and COP15, the parties will need to work on multiple tracks, including political consultation with ministers, intersessional work to prepare negotiation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework at COP 15.2, which could include streamlining the text of the GBF, COP decision, DSI section B and BBs, and section BBs. Other works related to the Global Biodiversity Frameworks, including ongoing intersessional work on resource mobilization, indicators, and finance. With the advice of the Bureau and the support from the co-lead and Secretariat, we will continue to guide the work on global biodiversity frameworks and preparing for COP 15.2. My co-chair and I propose to establish a small, regionally balanced, informal group to guide our intersessional work. This intersessional process will involve more than the co-leads. We will work with the Secretariat to develop a detailed proposal, including a detailed mandate, and the scope, as mentioned above, that will include the GBF, Section B bis, DSI, and related decision. And we'll bring it to the Bureau for approval as soon as possible. Bureau, in turn, will consult with you to bring back the comments. In order to allow for sufficient time to consider the outcome of the informal process and to bring the text of the GBS to the level required to allow for meaningful consideration by ministers, the Bureau recommends the working group to decide to convene a fifth meeting of the open-ended working group that would last up to 3 days during the days immediately before COP 15.2, subject to the confirmation of availability of financial resource by the 1st August 22, and subject to the availability of a sustainable venue. Thank you for your attention on this. Let us now move to the next item. Distinguished delegates, let us now turn to agenda item 6 on other matters. I see Argentina is requesting the floor. Can the floor be given to Argentina, please?
Muchas gracias, señor presidente, y
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and we thank you for the proposals regarding the intercession period. What we would like to be noted after listening to your proposals, we understand that this has to be a transparent and inclusive process, that it is balanced, and that it includes all delegations that have interests in these processes. We therefore hope that there's a clear path and a clear roadmap in order to move forward in this trip from Nairobi all the way to Montreal. So let us hope that all the parties can agree, and that all parties can take ownerships in these proposals. And we do believe that it is for the utmost interest of these principles that have been presented to you to be taken into account, especially for some of us that we have seen there were some difficulty regarding some items. Let us hope that that can be ironed for the coming future, for the coming discussions, and that takes into real consideration and equitable consideration to all parties. Thank you so very much, Mr. Co-Chair.
Muchas gracias, Argentina. Your comments are duly noted. I see une demande pour le micro.
I see that the Democratic Republic of Congo has asked for the floor. Can we pass the microphone to them? Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, for giving the floor. Democratic Republic of Congo would like to thank you for the proposals which give us more clear points and how we can reach Montreal in a better form, let's say. We were present at the first meeting in Nairobi, and we're here again going through Rome and Geneva. And every time we came back to look at the text as if there had been no prior discussion. So having this proposal of having this fifth meeting is accepted with a lot of satisfaction from the Democratic Republic of Congo. We would like to ask the co-president to prepare a very specific methodology which would allow us to advance and to be able to reach Montreal with a lot of more compromise. Thank you very much. Thank you to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Your comments and encouragement have been noted and appreciated.
Request for the floor. So we would like now to Switzerland. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. So for Switzerland, it's important that at COP15 we adopt headline indicators together with the post-2020 framework. We consider the headline indicators as an entire part of an ambitious package. We have continuously mentioned here in Nairobi our reflections on headline indicators when discussing goals and targets, but we fear that we haven't made enough progress to be able to adopt the headline indicators at COP15. So we would therefore suggest that the co-chairs prepare a pre-meeting document for COP15 in consultations with the co-leads, just to prepare the ground that we have a basis to further discuss headline indicators at COP15. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. Your comments are duly noted. I see now a request for the floor from Canada, and the floor be given to Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We would just like to express support for the statement just made by Switzerland. We note the important workshop that we'll be taking next week in Bonn on the monitoring framework and the headline indicators. Also note that we had limited time this week to really dive into that important topic. We all know that the importance that we need to give to monitoring our progress so that we really know how well we're doing and how well sometimes we don't do. And so we really would like to make sure that whatever comes out of that workshop in Bonn is brought together through the substantive intercessional process and connecting to the important work that you and your fellow co-chairs are doing and co-leads. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Canada. This is duly noted. Chile, tiene la palabra.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. I will be very brief. I would like to concur and support what Argentinian delegation happened, what we were expecting for it to happen from now until COP15. Thank you so very much.
Muchas gracias, Argentina. Your comment duly noted. Sorry, it's Chile, across from the mountains. So I see no more requests for the floor. So, Basil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Lead. I'm taking the floor to express that my delegation joins others in supporting your proposed way ahead. And we do trust that in the road from Nairobi to Montreal, we are going to be able to ensure a process that is transparent, that is inclusive, and one that does facilitate our work in the COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brazil. I hesitate to say that I move to the next agenda item. Okay, we're moving now to the next agenda item, and we'll see if there is any other matters to be raised. Russian Federation, please take the floor.
Спасибо, господин председатель.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to point out that in paragraph 17 of this document, the content of the intervention of the Russian Federation was not reflected in full, and we would like it to be amended. We shall send you our remarks in the writing.
And I'll ask you if you can be patient and raise your flag when we get to the report from the meeting. This now complete this agenda item. Let's thus move to the next agenda item. Distinguished delegates, let us now turn to agenda item 7, adoption of the report. We now come to document CBD Working Group 2020-04L1, which is a draft report of the false meeting of the working group. These documents were distributed, and I hope that you will have a chance to review it. I now invite the rapporteur to introduce the document. Ms. Elena Halwadi of Kuwait, you have the floor.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
President, the microphone is not working. I cannot hear her. Excellency. There have been a statement.
Dear delegates, could you repeat your statement? There may have been a problem with the microphone the first time.
Okay. شكرا سيد الرئيس. تحتوي الوثيقة.
Mr. President, the document CBD WG2020 is made up of the precis of the statements that have been tabled during the meeting and the organizational matters. I have reviewed, audited the report, and I found that it is in full, and I am submitting it to you for adoption. And the procedures and the proceeding of the day is going to be integrated by the end of the day. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Shukran, Ms. Lena Al-Hawadi. I would like now to propose that we review the report section by section. Let's start with item 1, opening of the meeting. Any comment on this section? I see no comment on this section. Section 1 is approved. So So I am apologize. I missed the preambular section. So let's now go back to the preambular background and attendance. Any comment on this section? I see the microphone disappeared. I'll wait for a second. Preambular is approved. Now turning to paragraph 2, organization of the work. Is there any comment on organization of the work? Russian Federation, you have the floor.
I wanted to make a comment about item 1. Should I repeat it, which I said 5 minutes ago? About
Please.
item 1.
Please repeat it.
Yeah, thank you. В данном документе, как уже говорилось, в параграфе 17...
In this document, in paragraph 17, the essence of the presentation by the Russian Federation is not fully reflected, and the full variant of this presentation will be submitted to the Secretariat in writing. Thank you.
Thank you. This document is reflecting the way it is usual practice for the UN. If you want to adjust, you shall send your correction to our summary in the usual fashion. I hope this is acceptable to Russia. Costa Rica, you have requested the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We have a comment related to the open one item. We have one comment on paragraph 15. We would like to correct the paragraph by removing the mention to the High Ambition Coalition, as the statement that my country made was on behalf of 48 countries and not on behalf of the High Ambition Coalition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Costa Rica. This is very clear, and we take good note of that comment. European Union, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. Just need also a small correction in paragraph 17, where the reference to the European Union should be the European Union and its member states. And in paragraph 19,
European Union, do you want to take the floor for paragraph 19? No? Okay. All right. So your comment on paragraph 17 is duly noted. Okay, so that section is adopted. We're now coming back to item 2, organization of the work. I see no change, no request for the floor. Item 2, organization of the work, is adopted. We're now moving on to item 3, report from the subsidiary bodies. See if there is any request for the floor. No. Item 3 is now approved. Moving on to item 4, post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. I see no request for the floor. Item 4 is adopted. Moving on to agenda item 5 on digital sequence information on genetic resources. I see no comments on that section. Agenda item 5 is approved. This takes us to the end. This report is approved. Distinguished delegates, before we turn to closing remarks, the Secretariat is pleased to show a short film that celebrates your hard work over these last weeks. Distinguished delegate, please, can technician show the film, please? This is very good to see all those pictures. Distinguished delegates, let us now turn to the closing remark. Francis, over to you.
Thank you, and I think that moment was refreshing. And dear delegates, let us now turn to agenda item 8. This is on the closure of the meeting. Before we do that, we would like to recognize someone who has devoted his life but is now not with us. And could I request the Secretariat to put the photograph of Mr. Mera? I don't know whether I start now or wait to see that. It's being loaded here. Yes, so ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, we would like to take a moment to honor the memory of the late Mr. Orlando Jorge Mera, the former Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of the Dominican Republic, who passed away earlier this month. Mr. Orlando Jorge Mera was born in Santiago de los Calaberos, Dominican Republic. He was coordinator of various permanent commissions of the state of the Dominican Republic from 1998 to 2000, and coordinator of the National Commission for the Protection of Intellectual Property Rights, representing the country worldwide, was part of negotiating commission of the DRCAFTA Free Trade Agreement between 2003 to 2004, and national focal point for the Convention on Biological Diversity from 2020 until 2022. He was a dedicated beekeeper, an activity that has represented a pillar in the construction of his commitment to the environment, and that motivated him to become a faithful defender of natural resources. Inspired by the political partisan history and public service of his family, he was appointed Minister of the Environment and Natural Resources, a position that he conducted honorably, transparently, and fiercely from 2020 until 2022. I am confident I speak for all of us when I offer my sincere gratitude for the dedication and commitment shown by Mr. Mera throughout his lifetime, and offer my condolences to his family and friends. He was truly an inspiration to us all. Thank you. May his soul rest in peace. So, distinguished delegates, I would now like to invite the representative of the presidency of COP15, Ms. Zoe Gumei, to address the meeting. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to express my deep appreciation for your hard work, constructive engagement, and the spirit of cooperation and compromise during the past few days. We are pleased to see that some progress has been made. They may be not so satisfactory because we had such high expectation for the Nairobi meeting, but they gave us hope. I would also like to thank our co-chairs, Mr. Francis Aukwa of Uganda and Mr. Basel Van Haaf of Canada, as well as each and every one of the co-leads for your tireless efforts. My sincere appreciation also goes to UNEP for hosting us this week. I would also like to thank Ms. Elizabeth Marima, the Executive Secretary of the CBD, and her efficient team who keep all aspects of this meeting going smoothly. Dear colleagues, the end of the Nairobi meeting is a new starting point. The world is watching and waiting for us to deliver. We must pick up the pace and continue our work in the intersessional period with passion and give our best. I am confident that come what may, we will adopt an ambitious and balanced global biodiversity framework in December this year for our planet and the generation to come. As a presidency, we will continue to count on your efforts and work together with all of you to make the second part of COP15 a milestone success. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Gumei. On behalf of the working group, we would like to thank you for your ongoing efforts in support of the convention. May we offer our sincere thanks for the excellent leadership and guidance the government of China has provided while serving as the COP presidency. I would now like to invite the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Mrema, to deliver her closing remarks. Ms. Maruma Mrema, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear co-chairs, delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, biodiversity cannot wait, and the clock is ticking. Just as the time has come for us to close our deliberations for the fourth meeting of the Working Group on the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Through 6 challenging and critical days, you continued to present your perspectives, discuss the policy challenges, and reached agreement on the way forward. These results could not have been achieved without your continued commitment and engagement. Thanks to your work here, a new global framework for nature and a beacon of hope for humanity is coming into view. No one said this work would have been easy, and for good reason, as you have been tasked with righting the ship on a worldwide level. The world demands nothing less than a global framework that will engage all society and sectors of the society with the highest level of ambition to reduce and reverse biodiversity loss, mobilize sufficient resources, and ensure that the benefits of nature are shared fairly and equitably. Undaunted, you accepted this challenge and took another historical step forward this week, and I congratulate you all. We started this week with a positive development, namely with the announcement of the dates and venue of the second part of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. On behalf of you all, I'm certain that I'm correct to once again extend our sincere thanks to the government of China, our co-president, for their flexibility, and I look forward to them leading us from their driver's seat. And I pay tribute to the government of Canada, the host of the seat of the Secretariat, for their generosity in stepping in steadfastly and offering us Montreal as the venue of the second part of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. I would like to thank UNEP as well as UNON for hosting us in Nairobi this week. And I would like to personally thank Ms. Inga Anderson, the Executive Director of UNEP, as well as Zainab Hawa Bangura, the Director General of the United Nations Office at Nairobi, and their team for supporting the organization of this meeting. I would equally like to offer my thanks to all the donors who have contributed to this meeting. In addition to those I'd mentioned during my opening statement, there were others. The Japan Biodiversity Fund has provided support for youth representatives during this meeting, and also for the representatives of women to participate in this meeting and a related workshop. We have also received support from the European Union and its member states for the convening of this meeting. Let me therefore extend once again my sincere thanks to you all for your continued support. May I also congratulate the co-chairs of the working group, Mr. Francis Ogwal of Uganda and Basil Van Havre of Canada. They have worked tirelessly to guide these important discussions and bring together a wide range of diverging perspectives while maintaining an inclusive and transparent approach. I would also like to thank the COP Bureau members for their guidance under the able leadership of Ms. Gumei Zhou, representative of the COP presidents. The COP Bureau members have represented their regions with efficiency and professionalism and provided guidance needed to deliver the successful multilateral meeting. My sincere thanks equally go to the colleagues of the different contact groups and other facilitators. You have worked countless hours, often late into the night, to help us advance our work. You have stayed the course, and you are to be commended. May I also express my heartfelt gratitude to our interpreters, behind-the-scene heroes who make our meetings possible. Communication is key for all aspects of life and critical for advancing our work on biodiversity. Along with the technical support staff of Interactio, thanks for once again helping us to communicate our many views to each other and to the world. Finally, I cannot forget to sincerely thank my highly committed team at the Secretariat for their dedication and their steadfast commitment to advancing biodiversity conservation and protection by supporting you all during this meeting and beyond. To Jyoti Mathu Philip for her role as Secretariat of this working group, and equally my heartfelt thanks in particular to my deputy and buddy, David Cooper, who has been there from early mornings to late nights throughout the week for everybody and us all. Thank you very much to the entire team. I know how hard each one of you has worked behind the scenes, but your contributions have been essential for our work undertaken here, and I trust it will continue even beyond. In closing, let me congratulate you all on these rewarding deliberations here in Nairobi. The working group made significant progress towards the finalization of the Global Biodiversity Framework for adoption at the 15th Conference of the Parties. You have set out your ambition with respect to the goals of the framework and they refined the essential targets related to conservation, sustainable use, and benefit sharing. You have worked to develop a plan for resource mobilization and other means of implementation and highlighted the contribution of nature to climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. You have also devoted time to charting the pathways for an agreement on sharing the benefits from digital sequencing information on genetic resources. Notably, you also sought to strengthen the role of indigenous peoples, local communities, women, youth, and other stakeholders to ensure that all voices will be heard and no one will be left behind. The many challenges and struggles of the past few years have reminded us all of the value of multilateral cooperation and unified action among nations. Later this year, it is my sincere hope that we will send the world a much-needed signal of positivity and inspiration. I look forward to welcoming you all to Montreal for the second part of the Conference of the Parties 15 under the China's presidents. Our co-chairs have developed a roadmap from Nairobi to Montreal, and from the Secretariat side, we will do our best to ensure all arrangements are in place. However, I remind the parties that as our co-chairs have highlighted, this will be subject to availability of resources, and they've given us the deadline. Not only that, we have to recover the deficit of the ongoing meeting, which stands at around $500,000, we also need now funds to ensure the adequate participation of delegates from least developed countries and small island states, funds for the COP15 conference costs, and now costs related to the 5th meeting of the working group. Depending upon ongoing discussions, the total amount may be almost in an order of $10 million, which we will need to receive in the next few weeks in order to comply with the UN rules and procurement requirements to have the meeting in place as you have decided. And as we now embark on the final stretch to the COP, I take this opportunity to remind parties and observers of the critical importance of registering early and promptly in order to ensure proper arrangements such as visa issuance are in place in good time. In the coming weeks, the Secretariat will send out additional information and the deadline that will be announced for registration will be strictly adhered to. Therefore, please register as soon as possible. At COP15, the world will come together to collectively deliver a new global agreement to reverse nature loss in the next decade and beyond. Together, with the full and active engagement of all stakeholders, I'm sure we'll deliver a clear, simple, ambitious, and transformative global biodiversity framework, all with the aim of achieving the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. May you all have safe travels home, and my warmest wishes to you all for the days ahead, and looking forward to welcome you all in Montreal in few months' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for these closing remarks. My co-chair and I would like to extend our sincere appreciation to the Secretariat for your efforts in preparing and facilitating this meeting. Dear delegates, we would now like to open the floor for closing statements from regions. We will, of course, give to others as well, but let's start with the regional statements. And you know you have 6 minutes. If you can even make it below 6 minutes, that will be much better. I think we are all waiting for us to gavel this meeting to a close. So I see Argentina. Floor to Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. This statement is made on behalf of the Latin American and Caribbean countries. First of all, we would like to reiterate our gratitude to the government of Kenya and the United Nations Environment Programme for hosting this meeting. GRULAC also wishes to thank the effort made in this meeting by the co-chairs of the Open-Ended Working Group, the co-leads of the contact groups, the co-facilitators of the Friends of the Chairs, of the Friends of the co-leads, and the Secretariat. We acknowledge the great challenges you had to face in guiding us and assisting delegates during this week of negotiation. GRULAC would also like to express our gratitude to all delegates and stakeholders for their engagement and efforts to advance in this negotiation. Even though we know that we have been able to move forward on the discussions on the SI and some of the targets of the framework, we are living with a feeling of certain frustration due to the lack of substantive progress and the little willingness to compromise that we encountered. Despite this fact, GRULAC wishes to reaffirm its firm commitment to this process and its willingness to actively engage in a constructive spirit in the work of the following months. Distinguished delegates, we have extremely challenging work ahead. GRULAC looks forward to an intersessional process that needs to be effective, inclusive, and transparent. We would like to stress that our work needs to produce results that are owned by all and that are helpful to ensure a successful COP15 Part 2. Dear colleagues, in only 162 days, the COP will be starting in the cold, yes, but very beautiful Montreal. We're entering the very final phase of the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and we call on you all to work towards compromise, towards lifting brackets, towards underlining our convergences over our disagreements. Let's not lose time anymore. Let us continue to work hard for a post-2020 framework that set us on a path towards achieving the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Asante sana, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. Argentina on behalf of GRULAC. Dear delegates, I have to again say we are only giving microphone to countries that are making statement on behalf of regions. So please, if you are not doing that, we would like to request you to please maybe get off from the list, because we only give to those countries that are going to make statements on behalf of regions. So now, next is New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, Madam President. New Zealand is making this statement on behalf of the JustCans group of countries. We sincerely thank the Government of Kenya and UNEP for hosting this meeting, as well as the Presidency, the Secretariat, and our co-chairs for their hard work. We express our gratitude to all of our colleagues, including in the Secretariat, who have worked so hard over the past 6 days and nights and early mornings, and for many weeks before, to ensure that this meeting was able to make the progress that it has. And there is no doubt that we have made progress across multiple areas of our post-2020 framework, and on the issue of DSI, we have taken significant and positive steps towards consensus. At the same time, it would be wrong to pretend that we do not have some concerns about the path ahead. We do note that some developing parties, including participants from least developed parties, as well as small island developing states, and some members from the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, were unable to participate in our discussions in Nairobi due to challenges with arranging travel. We hope that these challenges will be remedied before the Montreal meetings so that we can ensure a transparent and participatory approach at COP. There is no doubt that progress has been slow. We have not managed to achieve our objective of passing to COP a clean text. When we meet again in Montreal, we will need to do better at listening to each other. We will need to do better at finding common ground and solving the problems that our respective mandates have put in front of us. JustCans is committed to supporting the intersessional work that could unlock the progress we need to see ahead of COP. Not least because we know that there are differences in our positions, differences in our national circumstances, differences between what we want to see in the framework. And we are increasingly hearing more about the differences in what we judge we will need to implement it. But all JustCans parties have been consistently clear that the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework will require a significant increase in the mobilization of resources from all sources. As Germany explained at the start of this meeting, G7 ministers have already committed to aligning all financial flows with biodiversity objectives, and for those G7 members party to the CBD, to identifying and redirecting or eliminating subsidies harmful to biodiversity by 2030. In the recent GEF8 replenishment cycle, 29 countries pledged more than $5.33 billion, an increase of more than 30%, and agreed an absolute increase in funding for biodiversity of more than 46%. And the commitment we made in Hyderabad in 2012 on the mobilization of international public finance was first met 3 years later in 2015, and has been consistently met each and every year since. We take seriously, too, our commitment to being honest and realistic about the solutions that will help us implement our framework. A new fund does not mean new funding. Focusing our debate on a new fund, which only mobilizes international public finance, misses the unique opportunity that the Global Biodiversity Framework presents to drive systemic change throughout the economy, to unlock sustainable flows of finance into nature. Co-chairs, we have 5 months before we come together in Montreal to finalize our framework. Over the course of those short few weeks, we need to work together to overcome our differences, working in a context of trust and understanding. This will be essential if we are to adopt the ambitious framework that's needed to address the global biodiversity crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. I now have the following list of speakers: Senegal, I have EU, Sri Lanka, and then also Canada. You'll be given the floor as host of the CBD and upcoming COP15. Then Palau will speak on behalf of SEEDS online. So now I give the floor to Senegal, followed by EU.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Sénégal s'exprime au nom du groupe africain.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. President. Mrs. President, Mrs. Executive Secretary, Mr. Co-President. First of all, allow me to express my appreciation and congratulate all parties for this very diligent work they were able to carry out, making proof of high efficiency as of this meeting throughout the week. We would like to express appreciation to the government of the Republic of Kenya for the hospitality and the moderation of all activities in our stay. We'd like to congratulate the Secretariat for the orientation given, and more specifically the co-president and all parties responsible for their devotion and commitment, allowing us all to make some progress throughout the week. Having said that, there is no doubt as to the fact that there is much to do still between now and Montreal. We are deeply concerned by the fact that we still have various texts within brackets, and today we have realized how impossible it was to get to a consensus during this meeting. Despite that, in the light of the analysis by the co-president, we realize that we need to have a compromise on key aspects for the adoption of a world framework on the post-2020 basis. Mr. Co-President, our region is full of ecosystems and wildlife species that are so diversified and so interesting. And much of our population is directly dependent on the survival of these species. It is to the interest of Africa to sustain ambitious objectives and substantial expectations in that sense. Africa would like to reiterate its commitment to finding a balance worldwide for biodiversity and tackling these things still at stake. First of all, we need to palliate the deficit, mobilize resources by, amongst other, creating the Fund for Biodiversity. $100 million per year should be made available each year to all activities considered as helping biodiversity. Revise Article 20 of the Convention, that is a condition is sine qua non for the success of our works. Integrate in the World Fund for Biodiversity the use of information for digital sequencing in the matter of genetic resources. This goes through the taking into account of the advantages of SN within the multilateral worldwide system of benefit sharing. And last but not least, we need some leveraging in terms of utilizing best our financial resources. We have to reiterate our commitment towards the reinforcement of capacities and towards a transfer of knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, for Africa, the trip to Nairobi and from Nairobi to Montreal needs more engagement and more understanding. We commit ourselves to working with our colleagues, both formally and informally, intersessionally and inclusively. In this kind of dynamic, we would like to thank the government of China and Canada for having accepted to co-host COP15 and to support transparent and easy participation of all African delegates. I would like to ask the government of Canada to facilitate visa award for all those wishing to travel to Canada. Dear Mr. Co-Presidents, dear delegates, despite the difficulties we encountered, we were able to go to Montreal with true optimism, and we definitely hope that things will be very good ahead. But until this is possible, we will still be worrying. Let us wish to all the delegates a good trip back home. Be safe, and let us all see each other very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senegal. I now give the floor to EU, followed by Sri Lanka.
distinguished Madam President, distinguished co-chairs, delegates, colleagues. An intense week of negotiations draws to a close. We have all worked very hard to forward the agenda and to ready the texts for COP15. We commend and thank all co-chairs, co-leads, co-facilitators, all our colleagues, also in the Secretariat, for the efforts made. We believe that we have made significant advances on a number of issues. However, we are still far from where we should be on the level of ambition in goals and the targets and on implementation issue. There are several targets where we risk going backwards, even below the level of ambition of the IG targets. This deeply disturbs us. The EU and its member states remain committed to adopt an ambitious, transformative and easily communicable global biodiversity framework at COP15 to effectively and timely halt and reverse biodiversity loss and address the direct and indirect drivers of loss. We need to act now. We intend to implement the future global biodiversity framework in our region, and we wish to continue to cooperate actively with all of you. At COP15, we need to adopt a solid monitoring framework with headline indicators as well as a strong mechanism for the implementation, monitoring and review of progress, including through stock-taking. The EU and its member states are also ready to continue to work towards a solution on DSI. We are content with the progress made at this meeting. We reiterate our willingness to work on a realistic resource mobilization solution. We have had a frank and constructive discussion here in Nairobi that allows us to better understand everyone's expectations. As stated by New Zealand, on behalf of Just Cans, we also would like to recall that the EU and the member states also achieved the Hyderabad targets we committed to, including the doubling of international financial flows to developing countries. We also contributed to a significant replenishment of the GEF last April, and several of us have pledged substantial increases of our biodiversity ODA for the next years. The package to be agreed at COP also needs to strengthen capacity building and development, and here we think we made progress. In that regard, we welcome the consensus reached on target 19.2. We need to engage with each other constructively and identify room for compromise and common understanding, so that the time and efforts that we collectively invested in these negotiations result in the transformative actions that our world and our society need. We are ready to continue the negotiations in this spirit with all parties, the indigenous peoples and local communities, and stakeholders under the guidance of the Chinese presidency. Let us all come together, cognizant of the challenges that lie ahead of us, and combine our efforts to achieve in Montreal in December the transformative and ambitious global biodiversity framework we all have been working so hard towards. Co-chairs, the EU and its member states are committed to advance peace, reconciliation, democracy and human rights. This is the path we believe in and will continue to follow. In closing, we would like to thank you, the co-chairs, the co-leads, the contact groups, again, the co-facilitators, as well as the Secretary for the untiring work during this intensive session. We are looking forward to continue the work together with everybody, in formal and informal settings. We need to speed up in order to meet our joint ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I'll now give the floor to Sri Lanka, followed by Canada. Then we'll have Palau and Bahamas making statements on behalf of SEEDS. Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Sri Lanka is honored to speak on behalf of the Asia-Pacific region at the closing session of the fourth meeting of the Open-Ended Working Group on the Global Framework for Biodiversity Beyond 2020. The Asia-Pacific Group expresses its sincere appreciation to the host country, the Executive Secretary, the staff of the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, and all those who assisted in achieving this meeting. Mr. Chairman, this fourth meeting was important to review our progress and achievements through the work of the subsidiary body on implementation and the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice in order to complete the work in formulating the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This framework aims to stimulate bolder and more ambitious commitments to implement changes that ensure the improvement of global biodiversity during this decade, leading to 2030, and seeks to prepare for achieving more comprehensive goals of the 2050 vision of living in the harmony with nature. During the past few days, we were diligent in reviewing the draft post 2020 Global Biodiversity Framework in view of the discussions and recommendations that resulted from previous meetings of this working group, the reports of the third meeting of the SBI, and the 24th meeting of the SABSTA, and results of operations between relevant sessions. We also sought to develop a more well-framed and solid draft for consideration at the next conference of the parties regarding benefit sharing when using digital sequence information on genetic resources, coming up with recommendations that can be worked on and built on during the next stage, considering the outcome of the previous meeting of this group, the informal advisory group, and other related activities. We hope that this draft will be comprehensive in its scope and close to the divergent viewpoints on the matter. Our planet is plagued by many factors, processes, and events that are driving it further into chaos and disarray. We realize, as most of humanity is finally aware, that humans are the dominant factor. The challenges that humans have made to their world can only be changed by their own hands. We only have this one planet. It's our problem, and we must work it, solve it. Mr. Co-Chairman, this Asia Pacific Group renews its belief and hope that through clear vision, careful planning, and joint global action, we can move forward towards the future to achieve our goal of conserving this planet and its biodiversity. Finally, I thank you all for your efforts and commitments and look forward to seeing you all in the COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Lanka. I'll now give the floor to Canada, who is the host of the Secretariat, or the host of our Secretariat, the CBD, but also our host for the upcoming COP meeting. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Dear colleagues, thank you. It is clear how hard we all worked to make progress here this past week. And we did indeed make progress. But as we know, biodiversity is in trouble, and addressing this requires our collective resolve and efforts. Canada is committed to working in collaboration with the Presidency and with all parties to get an ambitious global biodiversity framework and a successful outcome for COP15 Part 2. We look forward to welcoming you all in December at the seat of the Secretariat. It should be a seamless transition. As we have enjoyed the winter here in Nairobi, we will conclude our discussions heading into our winter in Montreal. And Canada will do its utmost to create a warm atmosphere. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I also have, before I give the floor to Palau and Bahamas, I also have Chile and the Philippines. I've been informed that Chile will be making statement on behalf of a group of countries, while the Philippines is for the Asian. Please note that the two of you will have 3 minutes. So I now give the floor to Palau. I'm told Palau is online.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. But could I ask if I could give deference to Bahamas to represent the SIDS first? Thank you, Chair.
No problem. We give the floor to Bahamas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Palau. This statement is made on behalf of the small island developing states, We would like to thank the CBD Secretariat for the work done to ensure that these continued sessions of the open-ended working group convened here in Nairobi, Kenya. We also extend sincerest thanks to the co-chairs of the working group and the co-leads of the contact group for all their hard work, their patience, and commitment to their respective tasks in facilitating the various sessions this week. Small island developing states possess some of the most unique terrestrial and marine natural ecosystems in the world, some even considered biodiversity hotspots. We are also the most susceptible to the impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss. Therefore, we seek to ensure that the GBF directly addresses our common environmental needs, our challenges, and vulnerabilities. SIDS cannot and should not be overlooked. Although we are often underrepresented at these meetings, we have demonstrated a sustained willingness for dialogue in these negotiations in order to reach consensus and compromise. Even though our end goal is to arrive at COP15 with a GBF that guides us toward the 2050 vision, and although we have made great strides and progress in the deliberations this week, additional issues remain, which require further consideration. SIDS will continue our work to support goals and targets that are clear, concise, and achievable, but also fully incorporate the guiding principles of the Convention, taking into account its three objectives, but also integrates and captures our regional and national priorities and circumstances based on our diverse island characteristics. At COP15, SIDS wish to see a GBF that fully comprises the following: means of implementation, resource mobilization, capacity building and technology transfer at all levels, and technical and scientific cooperation among other necessary enabling conditions. The GBF should also reflect the rights of Indigenous people and local communities, as well as recognize the irrefutable and dynamic role of women and youth in biodiversity. In conclusion, SIDS, as a 38-member group of countries, remain committed to engaging effectively with all parties to build common understanding for successful biodiversity outcomes. We have concluded this phase of negotiations on the GBF here in Nairobi with a hope that the results are resolute, impartial, and meaningful. We urge all parties to understand that biodiversity is declining, and actions should be taken to ensure there are no delays in adopting the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework in December in Montreal, Canada, as it will set us on a path towards achieving the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Bahamas. I now give the floor to Chile, followed by Philippines. Chile, you have the floor. Remember, you have 3 minutes.
Muchas gracias. Hago esta intervención a nombre de Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, México y el Perú. En primer lugar, quiero alinearme a lo señalado por Argentina como representante del GRULAC. En segundo,
to echo what was mentioned by the GRULAC during the plenary work on Friday, it was evidential that we have not done enough work. We have reached very little consensus, and we have sensed a lack of clarity. So we're very worried. We still have divergent points and a limited time. That's why we need a clear, effective roadmap for the intersession work group and during the COP15. Nevertheless, we believe that our countries and others have showed how to work collaboratively and how to build bridges. We urge Chinese presidency and Canada as a host and the co-chairs, co-leads, and the Secretary General to facilitate the adoption within the global framework of nature and people. Regarding the digital sequencing, the SDIs, we take good note that we have made advances, but we regret a lack of progress in a recommendation draft project for the COP on how to deal with this information in the context of the GBF. We consider that, one, have a clearer scope of the digital scope and to recognize the intrinsic relationship that you have between resources and the sequence information clearance. First, have DSI inside Goal C and Target 13 of the framework. 3, establish a very fast process in order to define a mechanism that will guarantee the equitative and just distribution of the benefits, highlighting how important hybrid options are for our countries. In this regard, we kindly request that they are being considered just like you consider other subjects. We reaffirm our firm support to the consecution of at least 30% of Earth and ocean for 2030 and our commitment in recognizing the role for conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity that is conducted by women and girls, guaranteeing their full effective participation in the decision-making processes. When it comes to mobilization of resources and building capacities, we should implement and improve the effectiveness of existing structures. Along with the innovation, we need to accelerate implementation and cross-linking all the stakeholders and challenging all resources from all sources. Likewise, in order to provide an adequate follow-up and monitoring framework, we need to define the indicators for the Bonn meeting. For the successful implementation, we must adopt during COP15 all the packages of the post-20 framework by allowing the full participation of indigenous peoples and local communities. We need to safeguard the biodiversity for them, their rights and their traditional and ancestral knowledge.
Last statement.
I'm finishing.
In order to make sure that we tackle the issues of desertification, pollution, pandemic, and others, we need to understand their interconnection of applying synergies for satisfactory results in all spheres of action. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Comply with the 3 minutes because there's a time element with interpretation here. So the next speaker, Philippines, please, could you keep within the 3 minutes? Philippines, because there are still other speakers to take the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. The Republic of the Philippines is speaking with the support of the following Asian member states: Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, all present here in Nairobi meeting, commends our co-chairs, Basil Van Avre and Francis Ogwell, all the colleagues and facilitators of the working group, for skillfully guiding the process of negotiations. We also extend our appreciation to the government of Kenya and UNEP for the peaceful accommodation of all the delegates. These L documents, a product of our collective efforts, provide promising basis on which to continue our negotiations leading up to the COP, where we need to adapt an ambitious yet realistic post-2020 GBF. We need to work together to deliver less bracketed text, especially on goals A and D, and focus on our commonalities rather than differences to come up with an easily communicated set of goals. We have the goals of the Aichi targets as benchmarks for crafting our 2050 goals. Similarly, we need greater openness and compromise to guide us to progress in crafting the targets, and we look forward to the outcomes of the intersessional process proposed by the co-chairs. The challenges of the pandemic have taken its toll on this urgent and important process of developing post-2020 GBF, and our concerned contributions are crucial now more than ever. Despite these challenges, however, we are benefiting from the involvement of subnational, national, regional, and international actors, as well as various stakeholders, including IPLCs, women, youth, and the private sector. This is a reflection of whole of community approach the ASEAN espouses and the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity supports through its facilitation of the efforts of the ASEAN member states. In closing, we thank everyone present here today. The outcomes of WG 2020-04 are our shared hard work, brackets and all. And the ASEAN member states remain committed as a successful COP15 to come into fruition. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Philippines. I think I skipped to give the floor back to Palau. I was going to forget that. I'm told Palau needed to speak immediately after Bahamas, so if the microphone be given to Palau, please, online.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I will try and be brief. So Palau is speaking on behalf of the Pacific Small Island Developing States who were able to attend this meeting, namely Cook Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, Palau, and Samoa. We align our statements with the Asia-Pacific region and SIDS, as well as add our appreciation with others for the hard work that the co-chairs, the co-leads, and the secretariat accomplished for this meeting. We also extend our appreciation to all the delegations here who have worked hard to negotiate goals, sections, and targets for a GBF that would be agreeable among the parties. Co-chairs, this meeting has been a difficult negotiation for parties, and we understand the various concerns on the targets and the implication for countries to implement them. However, the Pacific SIDS are concerned about the rate in which the goals, sections, and targets are developed, as well as the content of the overall GBF. We worry that in trying to encompass everything all at once is resulting in a GBF with targets that are complex and hard to implement, especially for Pacific SIDS. And in seeking clarity on the targets, we have made them increasingly difficult to understand, thus making us question whether the GBF can then have the significant results within the 8 years that it would be implemented. 8 years may seem like a long time for implementing the GBF, but for the Pacific SIDS, 8 years may be the only opportunity we have for ensuring our survival, given the rate in which islands have been impacted. As big ocean states with small islands, we are conscious of our responsibility to care for the resources that we have been blessed with, and therefore we strive to protect as much of the biodiversity in our ocean as well as our islands that have some of the highest levels of endemism in the world. Losing our biodiversity means losing our ability to survive. We live incredibly close to the reality of loss of biodiversity and adverse impacts of climate change, both of which are a result of global drivers. As small islands, we have nowhere to go when we lose our lands, and for our smallest and lower lying islands, are now at a time where we have to think about being potential refugees as a result of global impacts. For many of us, our entire population is smaller than the size of a village here in Kenya. This is why we note the special conditions of SIDS, because of our increasing need for financial, technical, and capacity building required to ensure our survival not only for ourselves, but for the home in which we live. But we cannot do this alone. We are all part of a world that needs to work together to address the multitude of drivers and pressures that lead to the loss of biodiversity that we all need to survive. We all agree that the GBF needs to be ambitious, but also realistic. It is our hope that in COP15 we can come together to agree on targets that are simpler with a focus on global achievements, that we can all work together nationally and thereby together achieve the transformational change that we have all been advocating for. We wish everyone a safe journey home and look forward to an effective, efficient, and conclusive COP15 in Montreal, Canada, that will result in a global biodiversity framework that will implement transformative change at the local, national, sub-regional, regional, and international levels to conserve and protect the world's biodiversity towards ensuring the future of our planet and our survival. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Palau. Dear delegates, we thank the regional groups for making those statements. We'll Okay, I've been advised here I have on the screen Ethiopia. From after Ethiopia, then we shall go to the observer community. The observer community, please bear in mind 2 minutes, but that will not mean to talk at a speed where interpreters cannot say anything. Please see how you can tell us in 2 minutes what you need to tell us, but at a speed where it is also possible for interpreters to relay the message. So Ethiopia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Ethiopia delivers this statement on behalf of the members of like-minded mega-diverse countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, Brazil, Venezuela, Madagascar, Cameroon, Guatemala, Ecuador, Gabon, India, Bolivia, Indonesia, Peru, and Malaysia. We extend our gratitude to the Secretariat, co-chairs and colleagues for hard working during the meeting, and UNEP and the government of Kenya for hosting us. We, the group of like-minded mega-diverse countries located largely in the tropics, harbor over 70% of the global biodiversity. Our countries are rich in biological resources and also have high human population. Due to human-induced biodiversity loss, including climate change, ecosystem degradation, increase at alarming rate without precedent. Biodiversity is the base for sustainable development in like-minded mega-diverse countries. It is accelerated loss trends will affect our capacity to deliver on the sustainable development goals and to address poverty eradication and the reduction of inequality. Reversing this curve requires transformational change at all levels that involves change in social, economic, political norms toward saving life on Earth. Biodiversity loss is not a new challenge, but time after time we have failed to meet it, such as achieve biodiversity targets. Now more than ever, we need to put our words into action. The monitoring frame has to be designed in a way that timely monitoring and adequate review processes to improve accountability and transparency for the effective implementation of the post-2020 biodiversity framework, taking into considerations of the specific challenge faced by developing countries and non-punitive approach in line with Article 20 of the Convention. To adopt a post-2020 biodiversity framework at COP50, views of parties need to be balanced, narrowing down differences and successfully adopt it at COP15 in Montreal, taking considerations of the rapid biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation, the rights of indigenous peoples, local community, women, and youth of the developing countries, the ambition of the global biodiversity actors, and our political leaders. Since we have spent more than 3 years of negotiation journey, we do not need to waste time in bringing the issues of post-2020 into end. We agreed that goals and targets to be smart, measurable, and realistic. Nonetheless, there are redundancies, duplications, and complexities of the current goals and targets and terminologies which need pragmatic considerations, including producing new text, clean text. The goals and the targets need to be complemented by a robust package, including the financial resource. For the effective implementation of ambitious post-2020 biodiversity
Ethiopia, if you could try to
framework,
get to the
we
last
need,
statements,
among
please.
others, most importantly, high-level and dedicated political will of our governments to work together toward this shared vision. We are committed to implement a post-2020 biodiversity framework. We promise to seek this political will and work to mobilize
Now,
sufficient
Ethiopia, we are running
resources.
short of time for interpreters. Please, I may have to stop you there.
Finally, we encourage all parties, governments, and stakeholders to step up their level of responsibility, transparency, and commitment towards the adoption of COP15 and successful implementation of the post-2020 biodiversity framework. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you. Compliance with the time is a challenge, but sometimes we don't feel very comfortable as well to stop you in the middle of your statements. Now, we have the following in terms of the observer community: IPLCs, women, GYBN, subnational governments, CBD Alliance, business, academia. So please, if you could take the floor now, I give the floor to IPLCs. Remember, it is 2 minutes. IPLC.
This one? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I speak on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, the IAFB. The natural world is burning, and we have spent too many hours in a bureaucratic world of policy semantics. The way these negotiations have taken place reflect a clear divorce from the urgent realities and the emergency of the situation we are in. This business as usual process of intergovernmental negotiations must change. IIFB strongly believes that a human rights-based approach would make the GBF truly transformative and consistent with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and other international human rights as a minimum standard. The fundamental role played by our peoples in the conservation of biological diversity and the mitigation and adaptation to climate change has been proven. However, many of our proposals are still in brackets. We call for parties to remove the brackets around language on our territory, on our rights, territories, and biocultural ecosystems. We are greatly concerned by proposals to move IPLC's language from targets to be this. Our rights need to remain in all key goals, targets, and sections on IPLCs. We emphasize the need for our resource mobilization for IPLCs to ensure our ability to contribute to the implementation of the GBF. Therefore, we call for an open, fair, and equitable mechanism of direct access to funding that ensures these resources actually directly reach the IPLCs in both developed and developing countries. Finally, we thank parties that have contributed to the voluntary fund. We ask other parties to commit to full, effective, and equal participation of IPLCs from the 7 socio-cultural regions in the COP15 and all preparatory meetings overcoming the logistic problems encountered at these meetings, especially regarding visas. We remind parties of COP4 decision to include IPLC representatives in their delegations. We look forward to working with you all to increase natural ambitions and the full implementation of our 2050 biodiversity strategy. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, IPLCs. I now give the floor to representative of the women.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Habari wajumbe. My name is Sharon Nyambura. Please, delegates, kindly close your eyes and imagine what this world would be like. A world without indigenous women selecting and storing the seeds that ensure a wealthy harvest. A world without local women nurturing the land, protecting the oceans, and defending their territories. A world where women, in all their diversity, stop suddenly acting in favor of biodiversity. Imagine a day where the contributions of half of the population to conserve and sustainably use biodiversity simply disappear. That picture is truly an obscure one. That is a world where none of us would wish to live in. Then, why do we keep pushing women to live in darkness by closing our eyes to their specific needs and challenges and turning a deaf ear to their demands? The post-2020 GBF has the potential to address the mindless distractions of humanity and biodiversity crisis through a proactive, inclusive, and just approach towards its conservation and sustainable use. Through effectively recognizing women and girls' rights and integrating their knowledge, innovations, and practices, the post-2020 GBF could create, pave, and boost a path where nature thrives. This is the world where we all want to live in, right? Dear delegates, we strongly ask of you from this day forward that the whole road to Montreal has to be open, participatory, and inclusive. Until the end of COP15, we urge you to keep in your mind and heart the legal and ethical duty to ensure the gender responsiveness of the post-2020 GBF for the sake of our ancestors, for us, for our children, and all the new generations to come. Asanteni sana, mercy, gracias, thank you.
Thank you, representative of women. I'll now give the floor to the representative of the youth. That will be followed by subnational governments.
Thank you, co-chairs. This statement is delivered on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Dear delegates, when this meeting started, we asked you to be champions at lifting the heavy weight of brackets, stopping the same false solutions, empty promises, and ignored demands. With the very little time we had together to move steadily towards a just, implementable, and impactful global framework for biodiversity, we really needed you to shape up this week. Needless to say, we are very disappointed by the limited progress. Children and youth all over the world are facing the direct impacts of the complex socio-ecological crisis as we speak. And yet in these rooms, convergence around strong language is still hard to come by. We ask you to be champions of youth. We reaffirm the explicit language referring to the full, equitable, and effective participation of youth must be kept in the targets to ensure implementation, monitoring, and reporting. Make no mistake, dear delegates, this framework is about us. We will not welcome a framework without us. Furthermore, our rights to access justice and information must be respected. Many young environmental defenders continue to be threatened for the work they are doing, and many are denied access to critical information on projects that directly impact them. This must be addressed in the DBF targets.
We asked you to lift the brackets on rights, and yet many key elements on human rights, including the rights of indigenous people and local communities, remain in brackets or are being displaced from key targets and moved to BBS, a section that is not even without any certainty. This is deeply concerning and should not continue. We ask you to be champions of future generations, and yet we are still fighting to have them recognized in the very mission of this framework. We will continue to be the champions of right-based approach to be the heart of this process, as called by our constituents with thousands of young people from more than 100 countries. We also acknowledge the efforts of you champions lifting the brackets on our future.
Youth,
we hope these champions will inspire more parties. They will outweigh the disappointing results from this week.
I need you to comply with the time.
Nothing about youth without youth, and nothing about women without women, and nothing about IPLCs without IPLCs. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I have the following speakers, then we shall have closing remarks from the co-chairs. Subnational government, CBD Alliance, business, academia, and INGOs. So, subnational governments. Microphone to 709.
Can you hear me? Yes, excellent. Honorable chairs, co-chairs, and distinguished delegates, I've made a shortened statement as time is flying. I address you on behalf of the local and subnational governments major group. We welcome this increasing recognition of local and subnational governments in the global biodiversity framework to support implementation and the achievement of its goals and targets. Globally, many local and subnational governments are already making commitments and taking action to implement their commitments. We look forward to COP15 in Montreal and urge parties to adopt the plan of action on subnational governments, cities, and other local authorities. We will continue to mobilize increased commitments and action for biodiversity, through the advisory committees for local and subnational governments and the Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature Action Platform towards COP and beyond. As we said in Geneva, we stand by ready to help and work together so that we have the best chance to succeed. This is my last paragraph, co-chair. And finally, as representative of the subnational government of the province of Quebec in Canada, where the COP15 will be held in December, I say to you all, we will warmly welcome you to join us in Montreal. And as reminded us, our colleagues from Argentina and Canada, please remember, winter in Montreal is slightly colder than the winter here in Nairobi.
Thank you. Thank you, Subnational Government. CBD Alliance. CBD Alliance. Microphone 289.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I speak on behalf of the CBD Alliance. Dear Delegate, do you appreciate the magnitude of the biodiversity crisis we are in? If you did, the work of the past week would have reflected that there is no time to waste. It is outrageous that the three objectives of the Convention are being constantly undermined, and even CBDR is denied by rich countries. Some parties are doing all to accommodate their specific interest without willingness to compromise on language that solves the global biodiversity crisis. Enough is enough. Why is it such a struggle to incorporate universal concepts such as human rights, IPLC's rights, gender justice, and equity? We have tirelessly raised these issues only to see them being thrown out. In contrast, false solutions such as techno-fixes seem to have a free pass. The process is frustrating. There is an imbalance between the ease with which new language from developed countries is included in the text, while developing countries are denied the opportunity. The pandemic had shown that there is no international solidarity. It is only about money. Will we further weaken our whole multilateral system with an empty GBF? Trust needs to be built with real actions. We refuse to be put on the side of pessimists. This is about facts, agency, and action. We bring the voices of those who are protecting biodiversity, so our participation must not be restricted at COP. It up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. CBDS business. Microphone to business. Microphone to business 708.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I am making this statement on behalf of the Business for Nature Coalition. We are here to demonstrate that leading businesses are ready to support a nature-positive economy. In fact, many leading corporates are already taking concrete action to address nature loss, but they are operating in a competitive economic system.
Some technical problem. Microphone to 708.
Was right.
You got
Okay. If microphone to 708, please.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I am making this statement on behalf of Business for Nature. We came here to demonstrate that leading businesses are ready to support a nature-positive economy. In fact, many leading companies are already taking concrete action to address nature loss, but they are operating in a competitive economic system that favors short-term profit over long-term value creation. Governments have the responsibility to change the rules of the economic game. They need to ensure that businesses that are already disclosing and already acting to reduce their impact on biodiversity are not put at a competitive disadvantage. This is why we strongly welcome and support the discussion on Target 15 to include mandatory requirements for business and for financial institutions to assess and disclose their impact and dependencies on nature. Business supports such mandatory requirements because it is essential to create a level playing field. It is essential for business to understand their impact and enable them to act to reduce them. It is essential to create a baseline for action. And it is essential to provide the information needed to governments, to investors, and to consumers. These mandatory requirements to assess and disclose impacts must be coupled in Target 15 with an objective for business and for financial institutions to reduce their negative impact by at least half and to increase positive impacts. Businesses need clear, measurable, and time-bound goals. They need governments to create this sense of urgency. We encourage you to continue with this level of ambition towards COP15. Voluntary actions are not enough. Business must be compelled to act. Implementation will not be easy, but we know we have to do it. Business stand ready to work with all parties to find solutions and to ensure a successful implementation. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, business. Now I give the floor to academia, followed by IGO. Business, you have the floor.
Academia and research.
I'm back to business again. Academia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I speak on behalf of the Consortium of Scientific Partners on Biodiversity. Protection of biodiversity depends on transformative actions based on the best available science and evidence from relevant knowledge systems, including multidisciplinary information such as natural and social sciences and traditional knowledge. The consortium echoes the views of many parties that the GBF should be more effective in mainstreaming available science and evidence to all sectors and actors of society. We believe that citizen science has great potential to facilitate and support achieving the 2050 vision and is one of the tools to accelerate the involvement of all members of society, particularly youth. Consortium members call for further open data and capacity building and opportunities for increasing technical and scientific cooperation and resource mobilization to keep generating the science and evidence needed. We will continue to actively contribute during the crucial intersessional period leading up to COP15 and look forward to contributing to the implementation of the GBF after its adoption. We're pleased to see members of the wider academic and research community present here in Nairobi, and I pass the microphone to my colleague to continue this statement.
Thank you very much. This brief statement is made on behalf of academic and research community present here at the fourth meeting of the Open-Ended Working Group. We represent an inter- and transdisciplinary group of a wide range of institutions and regions, inclusive of multiple values and disciplines. United by our wish to advance long-lasting solutions to urgent biodiversity crisis, we have come here committed to the process to support a truly transformative global biodiversity framework to be adopted at COP15. Academia and research, in a range of ways consistent with our disciplines, will continue to contribute our expertise to this process. We look forward to continuing our engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, academia. And lastly, microphone to IGO 261 for international NGOs.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We make this intervention on behalf of IUCN, a union of states, national and subnational governments, and indigenous peoples organizations. The science is clear in that our window of opportunity to halt and reverse biodiversity loss is narrowing by the minute. However, negotiations here have been too often stuck between square brackets. IUCN urges parties to continue negotiations.
Excuse me, for WWF. Yes. So WWF, please take the floor.
You're cutting me in half. Oh, wow.
Microphone to 241.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of WWF, Campaign for Nature, TNC, IFO, BirdLife International, Conservation International, WCS, and RSPB. Science is clear. Nature is declining globally at rates unprecedentedly in human history, and with grave impacts for people around the world. Impacts will only grow if we don't change our course. Nothing less than halting and reverse the loss of biodiversity by 2030 will suffice. In fact, we need to have more nature at the end of the decade than at its start. More natural forests, more wild fish stocks, more pollinators, more biodiversity in general. That is what we meant by nature positive. This is for everyone's benefit, particularly the populations more vulnerable to climate change and environmental degradation. Yet, 3 years on from the first open-ended working group meeting, progress during this last round of negotiation before COP15 has been painfully slow. Across the whole work framework, there's still a massive gap between what we need in order to transform from a nature negative to a nature positive economy and the inconclusive and woefully inadequate text currently on the table. We need stronger leadership at all levels to solve key issues and build trust in this process. We need this to happen in the lead up to COP15. By then, we need stronger unity, solidarity, and convergence if we are to agree to a GBF fit for purpose. Recalling the COP15 decision on a comprehensive and a participatory process for the development of the GPF, civil society input into the process should continue to be enabled between now and COP15. Biodiversity and ecosystems across our planet are on the brink of collapse, and so is the CBD process right now. If nothing changes, we're heading towards failure at COP15. We cannot afford for that to happen. Nature is essential to mitigation of climate change impacts, to the increase of food security, to the reducing of our vulnerability to pandemics. Agreeing and adopting a truly transformative and inclusive GBF is a once-in-a-decade opportunity, a chance for all of you to be part of a history moment. Thank you.
Thank you, WWF. In the spirit of compromise, I'll bring back IUCN. 2 minutes, please. IUCN.
IGO 261.
Is that 261?
Number it is.
Two.
Thank you, Co-Chair.
Yes, please keep within 2 minutes.
We make this intervention on behalf of IUCN, a union of states, national and subnational governments, NGOs, and indigenous peoples' organizations. The science is clear in that our window of opportunity to halt and reverse biodiversity loss is narrowing by the minute. However, negotiations here have been too often stuck between square brackets. IUCN urges parties to continue negotiations in a constructive manner to find compromise on key building blocks and define clear, simple, measurable, achievable, and communicable outcome goals and action targets. We recognize that there are many substantive differences between national positions.
It has been a challenging 6 days of meeting, and many of you have been working nights and days throughout this meeting. Rest assured that your hard work is beginning to pay off. We now have a first state of a clean text for several elements of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This marks another important step toward final adoption at COP15 in Montreal this December. Delegates, you have taken on the monumental challenge of advancing the negotiation of what we hope will serve as a global blueprint to bring about the tremendous transformation required that will enable us to live in harmony with nature by 2050. You have done so with dedication, diligence, the spirit of cooperation, and for this, you are to be commended. However, we did not advance as far as we had hoped. It is clear to my co-chair and I that we'll still have a lot of work ahead of us. And we now have a process in place that will help us get ready for the text for the negotiation and the adoption of COP15 in Montreal. This is not the time to slow down, but time to reflect on what we have accomplished here. We hope that we can put this intersessional period to good use, to identify ways to further streamline the text, to lessen the burden of our work at COP15. You can continue to count on our dedication, engagement, and optimism. It is a pleasure and an honor to be working with you, and we're looking forward to the months ahead. Francis.
On digital sequence information on genetic resources, we want to recognize the important work that you, delegates, have done here in Nairobi under the excellent leadership of the co-leads of Contact Group 5 and the co-facilitators of the Friends of the Co-leads Group on DSI. The gains we have made on this complex issue are testament to what we can achieve when we put our heads together and committed to find a common ground. We look forward to meeting you all again in December in Montreal, the site of so many successful biodiversity meetings. We kindly thank the Government of Canada for its support to host this meeting and to the Co-Presidency China for its continued dedication to this process. We are confident that COP15 will be the most successful and significant meeting of them all. Distinguished delegates, this brings us to the end of our meeting. We would once again like to thank everyone for their support and active participation, starting with you, the parties, the stakeholders, the Secretariat, the interpreters, our host, UNEP and UNON, and the support and security staff who always greeted us with a smile, even in the early hours. Thank you. Before we close the meeting, we'd like to hand over to the Secretariat if they have some announcements.
Thank you, Co-Chair. A survey will be emailed to all delegates after the closure of this meeting. We encourage you to respond to it as it greatly helps us to improve our support to you. Please dispose of your secondary badges in the recycle bin as you leave the buildings. Delegates are kindly reminded to ensure that they satisfy all COVID measures required for their destinations and transit points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretariat. Dear delegates, now the co-chairs will jointly gavel the meeting to a close. And with this now, we say this meeting is hereby closed.